Just really quick, who's taken 621A or 621B? And who has not? Okay, cool. So it'll be friendly to everyone. So hopefully everyone can understand. Let me just make this feature. All right, so for this week, we're going to be talking about models and the database and CRUD. So this is kind of like a big jump from last week where all we had was static data. And now this time we're actually working with information that you can store in the Rails app, manipulate it in different ways you want to, and then show it to users in different ways. So before, you know how we just typed in like hello world into the Rails app itself? This time we're going to actually have things like users inside the app. And the users model is definitely what I'm going to be mostly going over, and then you can extend that knowledge to anything else later. So today, first talking about what models are and why we need them in Rails, and then a brief overview of like what databases are, like extremely high level. And then we're going to talk about how to interact with these models, and then how to interact with the models controllers. And then I'm going to give a live demo about how you can make users inside your app. And then it's going to be a lab. So lecture won't be that long. The most of the time today is going to be spent on the lab because it's going to be a lot more challenging than before. So again, this picture, you guys see it every week. But today, we're going to be talking about this area, the model and the controller. And this is essentially what makes your Rails app dynamic and not static. So first, an intro to classes inside programming. To those that aren't familiar with object-oriented programming. Essentially, classes are like variables that have extremely special powers or abilities. So, for example, I don't know if you can really see that, but at the top, you have two variables like year and shape. It's like 1993 and square, and that's all that is. But when you have something that's defined as a class, such as a user, you can create this user with like different variables inside of it. So you can have a user have an age, or have a user have an email. And you can also, this is also in Ruby, by the way, but you can also give a user like special abilities, like saying, oh, user.birthday, it will make their age increase by 1, for example. So in the bottom, I ran that code, and I created a new user that was 99 years old, and his name is Wanju. And you can like get those values from this variable, like this big special variable. And then you can also like run this method called birthday. And if you call age again, obviously it's going to return 100 next. So that's just like a very brief overview, and hopefully, if you didn't know this before, maybe it's clear now. But so models in Rails. So that was just a very general Ruby class. Models in Rails are very specialized, where the Rails framework provides you like a bunch of different things that makes your life a lot easier. So for example, you have methods that you don't even have to define anymore. So before in that class, if you saw, you see the initialize class, that's like the new. In Rails, if you just create this model with like one line, the new function is just given to you. You can also just generate a model with like different variables inside of it, like automatically. So Rails is like very magical. And that only happens because of just like this one line that Rails just gives it to you. And it's because the class kind of takes this kind of, all this kind of the active record. And that's just built into Rails. And we don't really have to worry about it. We can just see models as like very easy to use classes. So why they're important? Without models, you can't have data on your application. So you won't have users. So that's why models are pretty important. It represents all the information inside of your application. And this also allows you to use controllers that we learned about last week a little bit to show different data in different ways. And then future lectures, we'll talk about like other things that are also built into Rails that are super easy to use, and that'll be later. But yeah, so what a database is that it's a place where you put your data. And this is like one thing. This is like an example database that could hold like this one table. So a database holds multiple tables, and one table could be like the user table. So essentially in Rails, each model will have one table belonging to it. So if we create a user model and we give it these different fields called like name, email, and age, those are like the different variables that this user model can have. And then automatically Rails will also assign it an ID that makes your life a lot easier later. And we'll see that later too. You don't really need to know much about databases. It's just that a database is like the actual thing that holds your data, and a model is something that can like reach into the database and give your data for you. So you just tell the model what to do, and you don't need to worry about databases. The only thing you need to worry about is migrations, and that's when you're keeping your database and model like understanding each other. So you need to actually run the command saying, yo model, like you need to know this about your data. And then you tell Rails to do that, and it just does that for you. But you have to do that yourself. Rails can't do that automatically. And that's what a migration is. So for example, in this user model, I have 3 pieces of data, and they're 3 different users. And there's Wanjun, Sam, Howard, different instructors, and we have different ages and different emails. And each of us have like a different ID. Does anyone have any questions? I'm sorry if I'm going too fast. So yeah, this is the specialness of Rails, the ID. So what can I do with the model, right? So here's a question for everyone. So for an app, let's say Twitter, that's built on Rails in the past, with many different users, what should the Twitter app be able to do to its different users? Like what should the app itself be able to do with like the bunch of users that it has? Or just a user model? Yes, Howard.
Oh, what? Create users.
Yeah, okay, that's the one. You have to create users. So the Twitter app has to create users by itself, right? What else? What other things? That's one. So D. Modify. So another word that is typically used for modify is called update. And then there's one more. It's like, yeah, exactly. So CRUD, create, read, update, destroy. That's like the general overarching like kind of framework that you approach to show and change and alter models yourself. CRUD. So those are essentially like the only things you have to do with pieces of data inside an app. And now I'm going to talk about how you can actually do this. With controllers. So today we're going to not be talking about destroy because that's for later, but we're going to talk about create, read, and update. So create. Create is usually done through forms. And for example, a person on the Rails app might say like, oh, I want this new user named Howard, his email to be swag@swag.com, and his age to be 9001. Right? And you pass this into the model, and the model will like do that for you in the database. So if let's say we did that, bam, okay, Howard is now a new user inside our database. Cool. So read just means that you're just giving the user what they want. So maybe it should just show Wanjun, or maybe it should show all the users, or maybe it should just show like very old people, like people with ages over like 50. And then the controller itself will select which parts of the model to show and give that to the user. User as in like person actually using that. Sorry, like that gets interchanged a little. I hope it's not too confusing. So yeah, so let's say the controller was like only show old people. The controller will just pass to the view those 2 people. And then lastly, it's update. So maybe you just want to change the name of this Howard person into like Jason Derulo, right? And then it's a true story. So the controller will actually go and update that model for you and update the database, and the model will update the database for you. So, yeah, bam. Howard's name is now Jason Derulo, and he did that with the edit part of the controller. So I know that was a lot of stuff. So I guess I'll just actually go into a Rails app and make all these things, and you guys can like kind of go through it with me. I strongly recommend that you do, because in the end, you're just going to be like taking the code that I build and building more stuff on top of it for the lab. So like the same thing. All right. It's just more.
Yeah.
All right. Is this good enough? Yeah. Size. Can you guys see it in the back? Yeah. All right. So we're gonna make a new Rails app like you guys have done before, but I'm not gonna call it anything. So it's just gonna immediately. What the heck? Oh, okay. I was already. Oh man. All right. Okay. Why is the Rails app? I guess I'll put this code in later, but we can just do. Okay. So now that we're in the Rails app, you guys have seen these files before. Let me erase this. So now what we want to do is we want to make this user model, right? And how you do that, it's like very, very magical. What you want to do is type Rails new generate, or Rails generate model user. So this user is going to be the name of the model that we're making. And then after that, you can give it the fields that you want. So for example, if you want age and name, like we had before, you would just say age. And then you also need to give it like the type that it is. So different types that you can use are like numbers, so integers or strings. So for example, name would be a string and age would be an integer. And name, string. So after you do this, here, so Rails made these folders for us. So we can ignore the test ones for now because we're good at that. And there's two very important files, right? So the main one is the user.rb models file, which we don't even have to touch for the rest of this lecture. And then another file called the migrations file. So the migrations file is something that you run so that this model, the user's model, knows what's in the database. The database right now, so how you can see kind of like the representation of what your database knows is something called the Rails console. And what the Rails console allows you to do is, it's like launching your Rails app, but without any views. So you can just do different commands inside of it, and so it's a really easy way to debug. So right now, there's obviously not going to be like any like user model inside the app. So inside this database, there's no representation of a user. But if I go and I run the migration command, because this migration file was created here. So what it did for me was it made a table called users with these two fields that we specified. So now if we go back into the Rails console,
try user.here.
Yeah, just do user.here.
oh, okay. So now it's because there's like it never even like understood the user. So just running that, the database and the console now know that there's users exist, and that the migration command syncs those two together. So here we have these two fields, right? The age field and the name field. And this is like the table that I showed you guys earlier with the different users. So here, if we can even just simply create a new user right now. So if we do user.create with so this is like the create function that you can call to enter this into the database. Cool. So what just happened now is that in the users table, we've just added a user named Wangjun, and he is 99 years old. So if you do user.all, you can see, if you pretend that this kind of looks like the table view, the number 1 row is now the Wangjun person. Yes?
Can you repeat the last few commands, like after creating the model?
Yeah, sure. So after I created the model, I ran rake db migrate. So this is how you tell your database, these are the fields that you have to know about. And then after that, I open the console. So Rails C is short for Rails console.
So how do you get out of the console?
How do you get out? Oh, you can press Control D or Control C.
I think it's just D.
Control D. Or quit. I think it should work too. Typing out quit will let you get out. Yeah.
So when you do like user.all, so that's actually underlying it. You're translating that into a SQL query, and then that is
right. Yeah.
So it's independent of like the database being like SQL or Postgres or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So the Rails console will translate what the method that you call into like the database query. That's like something we don't really I guess, but that's what's happening.
So what does migration mean?
So right now inside the database, it had no tables. So there's like it does not know anything about users. So running the db:/migrate function command will put that user table inside the database, empty first. So it's empty, and then you can add. Now you can like add users and create users. Yes.
How do you check if you've added a user directly?
You can do user.all, and then it might show it. You can also find a user just by their ID, but we'll talk about that later. Yeah.
How do you say you added the user?
How would you?
How do you create the new user?
Yeah. So the function was this. So in here, you can even just specify none of these fields.
Okay.
But we want to just make it start with some age and make it start with the name.
So do you think that data to create a new database of user type and use that create
So what user.create does is it calls user.new and then saves it right after. So what user.new does is it's just in the console, nothing with the database. So if I ran, for example, user.new, right? And I save this as like, so the Rails console is just like a Ruby interpreter, and you can save this as like a variable. So Wangjun equals user.new. Let's do like Wangjun. So then, right now it's just in the Rails console. It knows of a variable called Wangjun and doesn't add it to the database yet. In order to add it to the database, you would do wangjun.save. So user.create does user.new and then that user.save right now. Yeah, so it just commits it automatically. It's like a shortcut. Yeah.
Why do you need to migrate?
So if you don't do it, then you cannot create, like the database has no idea what the user model looks like or is. So you can't store like user objects inside the database without migrating first.
That command like goes through your code and looks for things like that could have left the database and then help the database like you could have it in there.
So what the maybe this could make it clearer. So running that generate model users command made this file automatically. And what rake db migrate does is it runs this file. So before, the database does not have this table called users with fields, age, and name. But running db.migrate, db:migrate, it will put this table in there with those fields. It's like it's like magic how it knows and like gets the according things. All right, so I'm gonna move on now. Okay, so that was pretty much it. That's all you need to do is to make a user model. You just need to migrate so that the database knows and you can keep storing things in there. But now what we want to do is we don't want to just create users by using Rails console. We want to create users by actually doing it through our app, right? And how we do that is by using a controller and using a view so that someone can fill out the name of the user and their age, and then Rails will make that user for you. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to generate a controller that corresponds with this user model, right? So how Rails does it is that controllers are the plural form of the model name. So the model name was user, controllers, it's going to be users controller, and you add an S. And also, according with the CRUD and what we kind of learned last week, we can also tell Rails what different methods this controller file is going to start with. So I think last time we did an index function or a home function, right? So if you type in home, it will automatically make this controller file with define home and then end. It just adds that for you and also makes the view for you. So, but here, what we want to do is let's say we want to see the index of all the users in the system. Maybe that can be one of the pages that we can see. So yeah, what I'm defining now is just the different pages that you can do to manipulate users. So index, you want to see all the users. Show, maybe you just show is the name to show just one of the users. Maybe we also want to update them and edit them and create them, right? So after we do this, you can see here that Rails automatically created these 5 pages for us that we can actually go to later and see all the users and do all these different kind of things. But first, we want to change the routes better so there's a general form of controller in Rails and there's a models controller. And what you want to do to link the controllers to the model is to update the routes file. This is a lot of stuff. Yeah, question.
So why did we do the generate controller to DB migrate?
Why did we do the DB migrate after the generate
why
user?
Are we in the DB migrate directly when we're doing Rails generate controller?
Oh, I could be anywhere doing that. Yeah, so I could do it here, I could do it anywhere. It's still, Rails just knows where to make the files for you. Okay, so in the routes, so if you open the routes file, if you go into Sublime and then go to config and then routes.rb, these are the kind of very simple routes that Rails put in for you. But this is probably not what you want. An easy way to just automatically say a controller corresponds to the user is just resources. So when you do this, we can examine the new routes later. Cool. So now, just doing that resources now reroutes the URLs such that if you go to /users, it's going to give you the index page. If you go to /users new, it's going to give you the page where you can create a new user. So that resources is just a shortcut to routing all of your files together and making it make more sense.
Why did you use that to route.rb?
So I deleted the previous routes that were there, and I just added resources :users.
So you deleted all the get thing?
Yeah, all the get stuff is gone. This is literally the only thing that I have in the routes. Okay, cool. So that's there. Now, if we examine our controllers, so this is in app/controllers/users controller. So remember, next to the controller name, I put in like index, show, update, edit, create. Rails just put these functions in for me, and now it's up to me to tell Rails what sort of information that I need. So for index, for example, the controller is what's going to communicate with the model and the view and back and forth. So right now, if you go to the index page, Rails won't know anything because the controller right here is not telling Rails anything about the model. So what we want to do then, remember how we said for index, we want to show all the users. So what we can do is we can create a variable that's accessible in the view called @users. And then we can set this equal to user, which is the model, and then .all. And user.all will give all the users in the database from the model and make this available as an @users variable that you can call in the view later. So we can see this really quick by, so I'm going to save this. So this is the index page, right, in the users controller. Cool. Okay. So I'm gonna start the server now. You probably won't have to do this. Just you can ignore the -p 3001, but I'm gonna start it somehow. Okay, so back to the code. So right now this is the index page, and to get to this on your local host. So this is like the splash page. What we remember, the route will tell it to go to /users and then /in. Right. So this is exactly what you're seeing here. Right. This is the HTML, and this is the view. So okay, so remember how in this index controller we said, oh, let's set the users variable to user.all. And here, if we do some embedded Ruby, like we did last week. So I'm gonna do a for loop embedded Ruby to show like all the users one after another. So what you can do is you can do @users So what this for loop is saying is that for all the users in that users variable, call each one a user, like this right here. Call it user, and then inside, I'm gonna make it like a h4 HTML tag, and then do just to like make this like even more obvious, we can just do like person. So it's looping through each users and calling them person, and then we're going to show person.name. Right? Cool, and then we have to end this loop. Okay. Okay, so now what should happen is that Rails is gonna loop. Oh, here, I'll also add a new one. For each of the users in this user variable, Rails is gonna loop through and then show this in the view page. So, oh, I didn't slash. Oh, yeah, not index. I did.
You put at users in your controller.
Huh?
You put at users in your controller.
Yeah. Oops. Oh, okay. So right now I have no users. Okay, so I'll just create them right now. So okay, thanks. What's going on? Okay. Yeah.
You have an empty database.
Okay. All right. So now in the users table, I do have this user. So we go back.
Yeah, I don't know what it does. Theoretically, that should work.
Well, this should work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not it.
Go back.
Wait. While we're waiting for this, how confused are you guys right now? Like, Just raise your hand if you feel like you're confused.
Oh man.
Alright, okay. Is it because like these live demos are going too fast, or is that it? Yeah,
Okay. Do you guys want me to start over?
yeah.
Alright, cool. We can do that.
Wait, one, and you have some questions first.
Yeah, question.
If something that would help is if, I don't know if you can do it before or after, but if you could write down like what you type in each like window or
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll do that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do that in future lectures. Other questions? Okay. All right, we'll try this all over again because it's not working on my end either.
Your display is small again.
Huh?
Zoom in.
Oh yeah. So we're gonna make a new Rails app.
Are you guys okay with that? No, like starting from the beginning would be yes? Okay.
Okay. Okay, so we have this Rails app. So the reason why we need DB migrate, right? If we run Rails console, right? Okay, let's generate the model first. So the command is Rails generate model, call it user, and then we can give it different fields. So for example, a field could be age, which would be an integer, and then name, which would be string. So this is just a simple Rails command that you can type in and give it like any additional fields that you want, and it'll create the model file for you and the migrations file for you. Oh, I'm not in the. Okay, so if you see, it created this migration file for me that when I run rakedb migrate, it's going to use that file. And also it created the user.rb models file, which looks like this. There's literally nothing in there. And we actually don't really need to put things in there right now. Cool. So the reason why we need to run rakedb migrate is that right now, if you look into the database by using Rails console, you're not going to be able to create a new user because it doesn't even know that table user exists yet inside the app. You can't do user.all because this table is not inside the database. So for this user model to exist inside the database, you need to run rakedb migrate outside of the console. Okay, so now inside the console, you can see that this table exists. Is this better? Yeah. Okay. So now we can create this new user because this table exists. So let's say I want to create a new user named Wanju. The command to do that is the following. So I'm going to create a variable called Wanju inside this Rails console, and then do this function that the model gives me, which is user.new. And then inside, I can specify its age and its name. Cool. So now I have this variable called Wanjun, and it's just inside the console, but it's not yet inside the database.
Okay. If you show them the other way to do it, where you just do like Wanjun equals user.new, then like Wanjun.name.
Okay.
That's probably easier.
Okay. So so right now I'm setting the age and name in one go. What we can just do is create Wanjun. Let's call it Sam. Sam equals user.new. And he has no age and no name, right? So what we want to do is we want to set Sam's age to 10. Right? So Sam's age is now 10. If you go see Sam, his age is 10. And then Sam dot name equals Sam. Cool. So now this Sam variable exists inside my console. If I exit out and go back in, I'm not going to have access to this anymore. So what I want to do is I want to put it inside the database. So to put it inside the database, you just have to save it. Cool. And what this just said is that it's going to do like this database command, and it's going to commit it to the database. Now the database called users has this row called Sam inside of it. So if we now do user.all, the Sam record exists inside that. So even if I go out and go back in, the Sam still exists because it's inside the database. And even though I lose it from my console, the database will always remember until you remove it or change. Cool. Do you guys have any questions with just like that part of it? Yeah.
How come Wanjun didn't appear and you did user.all?
Right. Wanjun didn't appear because I never saved Wanjun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't care about identical entries.
Does the database care about identical entries? Rails is really cool in that you see this user ID 1 right here? I didn't say Sam's ID was 1, but when you commit it to the database, Rails just adds that ID field for you. So inside your app, you should never be specifying an ID of a model instance. Rails will just do that for you. I think you could, but it's like, I actually think you can. I don't know. Can you?
You can, but you should.
Yeah, you never should, because then you'll get duplicate things, and you never want duplicate things. Okay. So we want to show this Sam on our app inside the view. So to do that pretty quickly this time, I'm going to do Rails generate controller users. So the plural form of the user model. And then I'm going to set a function inside it called maybe index, show, and edit. Just those three this time. So when this runs, it's going to do these kind of not correct routes. Just because Rails does it in a very general way, it doesn't know that this controller is specifically from a model, maybe, and not for a static page. So in order for Rails to know that like the specific URL you go to, and the controller you're working with is a model controller, you just set that in the routes folder. So if you go to, if you open your, so in your config folder, if you open routes.rb, here you can see like Rails just put these in for you. Now there's 3 this time because I only put in those 3 functions. But
So why do you have to do all that again?
why do I have to delete all of them? Because otherwise Rails will get confused to which one to show like which controller. So this allows you to just work with the model and the controller and like just that way. You don't want other ways to get to the things you want to accomplish. Okay, so after I put that in, now if I examine like the routes, you can see that you can go to these URLs instead to see this. So if you go to /users, you can see the index file open. If you go to /users and a specific ID, like 1, then you'll probably see just Sam in there. And that functionality we now have to put into the controller and view to do those specific things. So now if you go into your app folder and then and here inside index, what we wanted to do, like I talked about before, we want to show all the users at once, right? So to do that, we need to tell the controller to go to the model and say, I want to set this variable called users that the view will know about. That I'm going to tell the view that this variable, the controller says, I have this variable called users, and inside it, it's going to hold my models and everything inside of them. Yeah, so the controller says to the view, the index view, it's going to say this variable at users has all is going to give you all the users in the system, and this at users variable is going to hold that information. So we want to show this information to the viewers, right? So now, if you go back out of controllers and just go into your app folder, and you go into views, and you go into the users, right now we just edited the index, define index functioning, right? So if you open this, okay, let me run my server first. Okay, so that's the same thing as just doing Rails S. I just have a bunch of different Rails S open right now. Okay, here, and then if I go to users, this is what I'm seeing, right? Okay, so now here, I want to say the controller just told me that at users has all the users inside that variable, right? So inside this view, I can access that variable. So even if I just do something like this should hopefully show me some kind of representation that Sam is inside. Yeah. All right. So here, this is just like a very ugly version of Sam. Right? We want to make it pretty. We want to actually show like Sam's name and actually show Sam's email, not just like some Rails representation of Sam. So to do that, we can go and say for all these users, so yeah. I want to show the person's name, right? And I'm going to end that loop. Okay. So before it was just at users, and if I had multiple users, it would just show me a bunch of like those ugly Sams and Wanjuns in there. But now I kind of made it a little bit better, where I'm actually gonna pull the name from that variable and show that on my view. Cool. Now it shows Sam instead of that, right? So the reason why Rails is really dynamic is obviously like you don't need this, right? You could just put Sam. You just be like, oh, here's Wanjun too. Right. Oh, there's another Wanjun. Cool. But the reason why Rails is cool is that it's dynamic, and now you can pull more things from the database. So for example, if I exit and I open my Rails console again, let's make a new user, right? So we're gonna call it Wanjun this time. So and then now we want Wanjun's age to be 99. And we want Wanjun's name to be Wanjun. Oh yeah. Cool. And right now it's only in the Rails console, and we need to save this to the database, so we call save. Great. Now, again, this loop is going to go through all the users and show their names. It just shows Sam and Wanjun there. So the more users you add, it's just going to go through all of them, and the controller is passing that, and this view is going to show that to you.
So what's that percent?
Percent equals is just embedded Ruby syntaxing. So percent is just like functions that you put in, and percent equals is something that you actually want to show in the view. So if you see like percent here, like you're not going to see like this loop inside this here, right? But then when you do percent equals, it actually like pops up. Do you guys have questions? Yeah. Yeah.
So why did you have to put /? I think it's
Yeah. So in the routes, you know how we put resources users? Rails makes it so that just /users will show the index. So
Oh yeah. So like the view never comes to database, right? So it's all through the little
right.
show like it's in there.
Okay. So now let's. Do you think we should do it right now, or just So now I'm going to talk about the other parts of CRUD that we can do with controller. So right now we just did like show all. We can also show just one user, and we can also edit them. So if we go back to the controller, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we open the controller's file, right now all we defined was like the index and what it should show. Let's also do like just one individual person, right? So to talk about this a little bit better, I'm gonna open up the routes again. So here in the routes, if you see, /users is just the index, but you can see that the users show controller here, it has like this ID also in this view. So what this means is that if I go to /users/ let's say 1, which was Sam's user ID, that 1 can get passed into the controller with this route, that value. So really quickly, right, so inside the show controller, I also get like this ID passed in by my route itself. So what we can do then is like set @user equal to. So what I want to do now is like tell the model, hey, go find just that user ID inside the database and only show that person. So what params ID is doing is that it's looking at all of the different variables that it has, and it's just going to take like the ID. So inside the route, it passed in the ID. It's going to take that and pass it into like this find function. So what it's going to do now is that, for example, if I go to user/1, it should find that user in it. But of course, it's not going to show anything yet because we haven't surfaced that on the view yet, right? So what we want to do now, so this is the controller where we just want to find that specific ID of a person. And then inside the view, inside the show view, we wanted to show that one person, right? So if we go back, /users/1 is a route to just that show page. So this right now is just going to show this, right? And then previously in the controller, we just set the @user variable to find that one user, right? So if we go and we say, hey, show that user's name and their age. I forgot it. Okay, so inside the route, I pass in the ID1 here. And then it should just find that person with the ID1 and show their name and age. Cool. So now all it does is users1 goes to the show for just that specific person, passes in 1, and the model goes and finds the person with ID1, Sam 10. So for example, now if I go to users2, it's going to show 199 this time. So that ID is going to show. Is going to get passed in to the model, and the model is going to find that one user that needs to check. Yeah.
Now, why doesn't show have a page?
Because the way we routed it, it makes it go like this. So resources users makes these routes correspond accordingly.
Oh, it's all on that.
Yeah, that automatically does it now.
Sorry. So is controller the place where to keep like all your variables, and then like when you view, so you don't actually click variables like for everything.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a question for the index page.
I still get like before we had the like user.name, there's like all the gibberish. Like I still have that question like my name.
Oh, so in the HTML you need to delete that line first, or you need an equal sign in your loop. Like take out the equal sign. Yes. Question. Question. Yeah. The controller? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Could you repeat that? Right. So the reason why. So the show is the page name, and that's where this show variable, this @user variable, is only going to be available to. So in order for the edit page to have the same variable, you just like copy and paste that. So right now, if you go to edit, you can't call @user. Right. If you put like a 5, a fine. So if you put like @users, what do you mean? How come you can only put the fine in the show instead of? So if you put this like here, yeah. So this ID, it gets passed. You know how you do /1? That's like the ID that gets put into the controller. Right? So yeah, so there would be no like ID variable in the index. Because the index is just this, right? There's no ID, so it can't know. And when you go here, it's not gonna know that this, because there's no variable in the show controller. Right? So for the show view to know, you need to put that variable inside the show.
Are there actually I'm going to show the HTML that you're using.
The show one? Yes. Yes.
Check-in code? Yeah. Type the check-in code at the start. It's JSON.
I felt like no, I never thought about that. That's just yeah, this is like all out there now. We're like
Okay, so what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna show the check-in code for this week, and then after, you guys can start working on the lab. I'm pretty sure it'll be tough to finish by the end of today, but you guys can. It's like not mandatory. You guys don't have to do it, but it will definitely help a lot to learn everything that we talked about today. The check-in code. It's JSON.
Wait, zoom in. Make it big. Oh yeah, don't let them see that.
Okay, so what's gonna happen now is that in 5 minutes, everything that I worked on, just like right now when I showed you guys, I'm gonna push it to GitHub to this week 4 lab, and the files are gonna appear here. And what you guys should do then is clone this repo and then try to work through the lab. And there's a bunch of questions that we've provided for you guys. And that should be ready in like 3 minutes. I'm just gonna go do that right now.
Oh wait, why do you think no? Oh yeah, The resources.
So the resources creates everything, which is all the actions you need to like do CRUD actions on the user. But right now we only have a couple of them like paired together. Right now we only have the create and show. I mean, it makes a show, but the rest of them will here because we haven't put them in.
Is this a recording?
So we're gonna put them in.
I don't know if anyone thinks it, but yeah, okay. But yeah, class still goes till 9. You should be working on the lab if you can. 2 minutes. Huh? Yeah, I'm gonna post everything.
Go back to the so ID when it says coded something, that's like sort of like a variable. So basically this is the ID. So remember it's user/1. That example is user1. Now with any of them, right? So you're like how the heck these all look the same, right? So why would you really show? The reason is because of the HTTP first. So get, which is just like receiving a message, and it knows to go to the show activity. You see that? Like you see how patch you might have to get show update all the same URL. But patch is like those are actually like updating the user. So you don't really go to when you do user/1, it goes to the show. When you do patch action, which is like updating then it will activate these routes. These routes don't have HTML codes. The updates don't show that. It's just happening.
Like how do you know like this? What do you mean different? Like this is the show action patcher.
Whenever you enter something in the URL, you are getting it. You are just getting the HTML. Get is a verb that means when there's no change in data. You're not adding data or updating data. We'll use update. You actually use standard. Okay, so imagine like you actually say there's like an update button. You can like enter a different name. This is Sam. This is Sam. So you update a different name. Right. It goes to the update action and runs that code. Right. And then it redirects somewhere. You even redirects to the show. Usually after the update, it stays on the update. So update is not really an HTML page.
Also, homework will be released sometime this weekend and due 1 week after.
Like the entire lecture.
I'm not on the yeah, it should be
It's not the same. Sam is the most controversial. But the reason why you're thinking is do you know the dev box goes on a little bit? Yeah. So plus it's up there.
Inside Vagrant, Rails dev box.
This one, okay, because because lab one inside the Rails dev box, and the editors that are already correct. Okay, so when I open it, like I see it, it's there. Like the line. But when I vagrant SSH, then I can't go. Like I can't even do it. So when I get the same file, that line is there.
So I think that's exactly how it is.
Yeah.
It's like a
Hey, Howard, how do you fix the secret style?
They can pull not from. Like if you look at my GitHub, they can pull from there because that's what they're supposed to do.
But they're having that issue with
Oh, Wanju? Oh, it's Wanju's lab. He needs to remove secrets that YML is giving because that's actually just like manually put in. Wanju.
So you would do
Wait, secret style is what I didn't get. Maybe that's just
I thought I hit it.
getting the secret style YAML probably.
It's happening for every like week. If you do it for like week 1, it's like the same thing.
Yeah, it happened in week 1 because that was an empowered thing. You fixed it so you should pull from
Because Sam would know this the best and tell him about that. Okay. Yeah.
So you Decal from Space Labs.
How do I do do I just go with it?
Yeah, so go to your lab and then get that URL.
Yeah. Oh, so you need to set up a variable.
Is it working?
It's taking a while.
Yeah, I don't know. Vagrant has problems with it. I feel like you just wait and it just takes a bit. Are you in Vagrant?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
What's
it might take a little
causing?
bit.
What's causing the problem?
Huh?
What's causing the problem? Like the.
So right now, the Git. Well, before, what Howard was running into was the git ignore had secrets.yaml as like inside it, meaning it would ignore it whenever there's a new push to that repo. But we don't want that to happen. But that shouldn't be a problem for Wanted repo.
I think it might be something I did. It's like I was trying to like set like big enough something and then actually
Okay, so
yeah.
cool. Let's see. Okay.
That's like the most like clean. There's like you can add.
I could resolve those GitHub
This one? Yeah.
When you cloned before, were you in the Vagrant box?
I don't remember. Yeah, this happened actually like last week.
Because I don't use Vagrant ever. Do you know how to get
So right now, it looks like oh, I know it's wrong.
Now.
There's so many reasons. Most migrations are small changes. So yeah, so oh yeah, like when you do a migrate, so basically the only way you do that is just like a new table, like a new schema, or but that's not because if you had to just like change stuff in the database, you actually just get recorded right, like a new field or a new table. Oh, so you make like structural changes. Yeah, like structural changes to the data is a migration. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Oh, actually,
Oh, it's already
So the reason why so every single actually ideally you never get just make sure it's
really? I would just like delete everything and then start. Probably start.
you have a server running.
And then you rerun your text. Is Sam anywhere here?
Because this one, I'm not sure exactly.
Sorry. No, sorry. Sit down.
Hey Howard, do you mind just let it drop a table off top of your head in Reels console?
Drop the table. Yeah. Like make TV drop. Yeah. Make TV drop. Yeah. But not from context. From like terminal.
That is elite every like so edit.
So what you basically did, so I think you should explain migration. So you created a migration file, you ran the migration, you deleted the migration, and you tried to run the same migration and run that.
That was actually really important. We forgot to mention everything migration. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So what I did now is drop all the tables and running your migration.
So that was with the like the migration.
I'm rerunning the So what Rails is your migration. See all the migration.
Yeah, I didn't really talk about migration.
Because it's no longer
Yeah. I mean, like.
Like this is when you do make TV migration. Exactly. So right now, you're creating a
Yeah, I downloaded it.
page. So to generate like a new migration.
Everybody, quick announcement. When you make a migration file, don't edit the migration file itself. That's actually really important. When we ask you to delete a field, we're asking you to do another migration, because if you do that, you have to drop your database and restart it. And if that's your problem, just like come up to me and I'll try to fix it. All right?
Yeah.
So this is how you and then when you run this,
You have to build automatic migration. What migration is, it creates
something like
a
this.
database.
Real different
What
migration.
should do.
You need a migration.
So,
So
if you edit
what would happen?
with stuff already in
Real
your
smart
database,
enough to see you do it. How about your top?
Rails goes to the
So when you run this, Rails is it's really smart. So that you can each from users, it'll create that migration file automatically. You should just like try it out. You don't have to run the if you put like smooth age from users, and then field name would be age colon. So you do this, what it will do is it will make a new migration, and it'll look exactly like this file, except it'll be like on drop for table users. It'll just say like, it'll just drop that table users. When you do,
So like, let's say you just so Rails.
I'm saying like to add something. I might edit the file again and then you can do more.
Hello? Hello? All right, so I think a lot of confusion right now is from like how migrations and how you can actually drop something using a migration. So to do this, you also use the Rails command line. So if you see here, like the migration that was automatically created for us before kind of looked like this file. You could write this yourself, but you pretty much never want to. You want to do it through Rails itself. So what you would do is do something that's a one-liner as well, where you say Rails generate migration, and then remove the field name that you want to remove, and then from the table that you want to remove from. So for example, for this question, you would say remove age from users, right? And then here you would actually say the field name that you're trying to remove. So here it's age, and then the data type is integer. So after you do this and press enter, Rails will do like a script for you, and it will say, oh, we created a new migration file for you in db/migrate, and it's gonna look like this. And then to run it, all you do is rate db migrate, and it will run that script for you and drop that table, drop that column. So this is what you want to do, and then after you want to do rate db migrate. You can do anything though. It's just like something for you to help remember what it is. Yeah, being as accurate as possible.
Or script model. There is a lot of don't use them. Is there anything under that? Okay, so you have to make oh yeah, okay.
People were saying it was
Okay, so you found it, right? It returned. It returned the object.
that was
Yeah, you
like
saved it now. And now we have an object. Okay, I don't know.
that's why I did Rails generate
And you're just like, wait, so whatever.
You don't want to change that.
Oh, I don't know what was wrong.
Yeah. Create. There is the one line that you can do. like to do the query and the update?
Yeah.
Okay, let me go see if I remember. Okay, do the query. Okay, you got this. Whichever. That gives me the dot update.
It said,
And then name.
yeah, so.
Yeah, I understand. But okay, that's what I was saying. See, I did
Like using the sign and the ID of the person. So like you did all have the
Okay, right. So this is the migration. Rails now a bit you should think that too.
There's like calling user to find it.
Yeah.
I can smell your
so and
from the user.
now who has the user object?
Oh my God.
Okay.
Wait, Sam.